If you've watched any of my reviews, you may already know this, but for those who don't know, I love it when a game makes good use of audio. From soundtracks fitting the action on screen, to audio cues that bring the world to life, it needs to be perfect to get my seal of approval. One such game that has managed that is Guild Wars 2, and their latest expansion, Heart of Thorns, has once again managed to hit the mark in the audio department. This week, ArenaNet are releasing a brand new behind-the-scenes video that focuses on the sound design of Heart of Thorns. Ahead of its release, I was invited by NCSoft to chat to Cady and Schroeder, both of whom are sound designers at ArenaNet, to talk about how they brought the Maguma jungle to life through the sound effects and world ambience. Annoyingly, the audio recording of the interview isn't perfect, but I have done my best to clean it up as much as I can, so enjoy! Right guys, well to start off, thank you ever so much for taking time to join me to chat about Heart of Thorns and the sound design. Just to kick things off though, can you just give us a brief description of your roles at ArenaNet?
Sure, this is Schroeder. I'm a sound designer. Typically I work a lot with the profession skills, things that blow up and cause damage, whatever, that kind of thing. Also do some creature sound design, and yeah. That's my main focus. We do kind of drift over the board a bit, you know. We'll get involved in different areas too. So.
And Cady, sound design. I do creature sounds as well, map ambience, and then I work with the dialogue or the writers to make sure that the characters have their texture, their kind of character that sounds different than other characters. So, you know, one's more growly or one's more dry and ghost-like or something like that. So kind of, yeah, work with the writers a lot.
Cool. Right, for those who might not know about sort of the particular processes that you go through, can you describe how you go from having the idea of what you want to go for to realizing that sound effect for the game? Just like give us a general idea of how you go about that.
Sure. Well, I could talk a little bit about maybe the Revenant would be a good place to start.
Cool. Okay. Yeah.
Kind of in the beginning of talks with design about the Revenant, what he was all about. You know, what would make him different, unique, cool to play, and all of that. Kind of the idea of summoning these legends really gave me this abstract idea of maybe he can be our metaphysical DJ who's kind of pulling these guys out of the ether and putting them into a mix and mixing those up and casting spells. And that's kind of where I started with that and got really abstract, by chopping up, interesting shortwave static broadcasts and reassembling those in weird, unusual ways to kind of make beds of sort of otherworldly things, and then did a lot of synthesis. Just kind of tried not to limit myself a lot, just keep that metaphysical DJ term in mind and just kind of go nuts with that. So I always start out with just a huge directory of just random sounds that I think are cool, and I'll post those, and the designers will listen to those, and everybody will give them a thumbs up, or hey, that's really cool, what if we took it this direction? So we kind of get a lot of iteration going in the very beginning. So
cool. As I understand it, you use a proprietary engine that you guys have made in forging these sounds. Can you explain how that helps you to basically get to designing them and bring them into the game?
Yeah, so we kind of look at creatures. Let's talk about creatures. And we get an idea of this one's more wood-like and dry, like the vine tooth, or a mushroom would be kind of wet and rubbery. We get some ideas to contrast them, so it's not that everything sounds the same. They have the same growl, so I mean, even if you could turn the visuals off, you would know, oh no, a mushroom army is right behind me and they're going to come and clobber me.
Yeah.
So we kind of get some ideas, and then we go into the Foley room and start bringing objects in instead of, let's pull up a bear or a raccoon from a library. They kind of have a same, they do their chatter. And if we do some object-based stuff, we can really play with the gestures and make this kind of gesture up and gesture down and be more urgent or chattery. And so we're kind of a little more playful with how we can make those sounds. And then it's finding that object, like, the stand-up bass would have a woody tone, and it's round, and it's we have that in that video. It has a little bit of a shape to it, and so it's got a character already. And then we can add in things like the cardboard box, which is really dry and kind of aggressively screamy. And then those two go together and make this screech. So it's kind of iterative on getting different objects. Sometimes we record things in the Foley studio and we really don't know where it's going to be used, but we record it anyways. And sometimes we really have like, okay, this cardboard box is going to make a great scream for, the Dino Army. And that one just kind of fell together. I was doing my recycling and the box lid scraped, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And it was this one box, it's the one box. And I brought that into work and did it, and it's really annoying in a perfect way.
Yeah. So do you have those moments where you're just out in the middle of the street and go, yes, that sound, I need that sound, and you have to go and record it? I mean, does that happen a lot?
It's kind of, it's sort of embarrassing for the family. The other day I was shopping at this Target store, and I hear this crazy door that's leading back to this hallway that's, making us. I'm like, okay, I've got to get my recorder. So here I'm standing in the middle of the department store, recording, and people are looking at me like I'm, some nut, which, I probably am, but.
They don't know what it's going to be like. They don't understand,
That's right. The real fun about Foley itself is because you can take these objects out of context.
Yeah.
And we, as a sound designer, are trying to match that with something that it could be, and so it's the kind of sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors. And that's really fun and exciting for us to kind of pair it up and make it believable, and it's totally something you would never think. I want to add one thing. So when I'm throwing stuff out, sometimes I'll bring it in first to the Foley studio and break it, and then I'll throw it out.
Yeah.
And one thing comes to mind, which was the toilet. And so I brought it in, we smashed it to get some sounds for, I think, regrown or something, cracked, crystally, kind of heavy glass stuff. And after I had everything broken up and on the ground, I used sand and I poured on top of it, and I got this kind of fairy dust type of mystical air. And I did that a year and a half ago. And so when we started to make the Gold City, I used that sound and played it in this big reverb, and it just gave it this lush, tinkly air and this kind of magical sense. But yeah, it's a toilet with sand on it. I mean, it's kind of silly, right?
Now, you've been working on Guild Wars 2 from pretty much the very beginning, coming up with these sound effects for the game. Has the process changed for you during that time, or has there been any advancements in the process? And if so, what has that been? We joined, I kind of were pretty hardcore in making a library, and now we kind of took a step back a little bit to get in the implementation and work on the engine and kind of flesh that out and make sure we could do all our functions that we needed to. And now that that's kind of fleshed out, we're back onto getting more sounds again. I think we kind of go in waves.
Yeah, and I think the evolution of our audio engine has sort of forced us to kind of rethink even a bit more modularly on the way we record and add content to the game. Yeah. So we're very much like creating, it's like our Guild Wars 2 sample set, and we've got all of these little elements that instead of being baked together and pre-composed, we can combine those at runtime and manipulate them a lot better now. So we get, just an infinite more variations of sounds, just less fatiguing for the ears. So probably creating, I don't know if we're necessarily creating more content, because of that. We're just creating different content that's divided, differently.
Yeah, I will say that the team has grown, and that's given us the power to really shine in what we do best, like each team member. So in the early beginnings, when it was James and I was doing sound design, Foley, and implementation. We had one implementer come in, and then as time goes by, we got another implementer. That implementer would be McLean and Deemer, and then he started to do the composition. And now we have two more implementers. Jerry's sound design. We have Rob doing audio development, so tool side. So yeah, it's pretty much, that's changed a lot, and I've personally been more back on the Foley and sound design and focusing on that and trying to come up with new and unusual ways to make crazy sounds.
Speaking of like the crazy ways I come up with sounds, you've done some awesome stuff in the past. I was doing a bit of reading earlier, and of course there was the video that you did a few years back where you came up with the sounds using the fire, which I think anyone who hasn't watched needs to, because fire. And of course there was the hilarious way that you developed some underwater sounds by putting a mic and a comm dom and then putting it in a jacuzzi. Has there been anything as crazy or awesome that you've done in designing the sounds for Heart of Thorns?
I think, so we went to Fort Worden Cisterns, and that is a very unusual reverb. It's 40 seconds long, which it doesn't have a fall off. It just keeps going. You're in there, you talk, and it just keeps going. So that it's a 2 million gallon water tank that doesn't have any water in it now, and it's really hard to get to. But so
you have to lower yourself through a hatch.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only 6 people can go in there. One person has to stay up on top. It's really creepy, and it's almost that Lost type of vibe where you're going into a hatch, and it's completely dark in there, and it's disorienting, and you like see one column, but there's really like 11 of them in a row, and so that was very disorienting and intriguing to be a sound designer in there. And so we went in and did an impulse array in surround, and we've been using that to add some like size to our bosses and dragons, and it was a big component in the Gold City, taking these chimes and toilet sand and playing them into that environment, so we didn't have to be there anymore because we had these impulses. And creating this lush environment that is kind of, is exaggerated and large and unusual.
That's absolutely amazing. Now, Heart of Thorns, we've already mentioned, has introduced the Revenant class, along with the elite specs that have been for the other classes. In your opinions, which ones were your favourite to create the new effects for?
Oh man, it's like asking me to pick out a favorite child. This one, he's way more well behaved. I personally, there was a lot to be said for Revenant because it was such a new class and all that. And, the Herald was just kind of an extension of what I'd already created there. But I will say, I think the new Mesmer specialization for me, it was a lot of fun. Creating the wells and all that, being able to go in, and I brought in tons of different clocks, like cuckoo clocks and pocket watches and old antique wrist watches. And
that was fun to record.
Yeah, we did a ton of, we've got a great Foley room that's super quiet, so we were able to bring in some very subtle things and close mic them and just crank the heck out of the gain and really get these little minute details that you would normally not be able to because the room noise would drown it out. So that was fun, and then being able to work with combinations of tones. Tried to approach all of the specializations as musically as I could, because by doing that you kind of, even though this is something you may hear a lot, it's tonally pleasing, and you're not just getting a stab in the ear every time you use it or whatever. But yeah, I would say the Mesmer stuff, the Chronomancer is definitely, that was a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Let's quickly go back on design for Heart of Thorns. I mean, you've added in these in the game world, there's these new exotic locations and intimidating foes that offer something a bit new. Did you find any particular aspect in creating that challenging, in capturing it or realizing that sound?
Vinetooth took a little while. I wanted him to be aggressive but different, and his attack long, which he kind of like his neck chatters and he's really he's just really bitchy. He's cranky, and but he's really big too, and he's not as boomy and round. You can't just use the upright bass and get the big bear growl and pitch it down and he's not an ogre. And so trying to get that happy medium between, high-end intensity, but still in the wood side of things. So actually I worked on that a little bit, put it in, played it for a while, and then came back to it. And I think that's one of the things Arena does well is giving us time to iterate, to play with things, and not necessarily just, here's your, 40 sounds for that creature and ship it, and you have to do it in a day. So it was kind of I'm gonna find out his voice, but it took me a couple times, and 3 weeks later, it stumbled into it, and it just turned out I was really happy with it. So that was a little tricky. Sometimes creatures, I think, are one of the hardest things, because you have to have this character, and he's gotta be sad, he's gotta be happy, he's gotta be, he's gotta die, he's gotta have a fidget and a choir and a call and a response, and they're so varied, but they all have to come from the same family, and sound like they're from the same creature.
And I think a lot of it too, we tried to contrast the species quite a bit too. Like I worked on the mushrooms and the chalk.
Yeah.
And trying purposely giving them a little bit of a humor, to kind of, they're still dangerous, but they're still, pretty goofy when you think about it in certain ways,
Yeah.
And that contrasts the big, badass dino that's trying to, eat you, so.
Yeah, to be fair, I find those mushrooms highly annoying, so you've done a good job in helping make that extra annoyance. Just switching gears for a second, obviously the video has been done in collaboration with Sennheiser, and you use a lot of their mics, as we see in the video, which I approve of because I'm a big fan of their stuff, having used their mics with a lot of recording stuff I've done in the past, and I use a Game Zero headset myself. With other companies out there, your Shores or your Samsons, I mean, what drew you guys to using Sennheiser specifically over everything else?
Well, we started with the shotgun, and it was... It's a stereo shotgun. It's the MS. It's the 418S. So it's got a little more flexibility. You could be out in the field, really get that discrete sound, and cancel stuff around you, or you could blend in that width. And I think just that kind of Swiss Army knife approach was attractive. It's very clean. It has a lot of range to it, and then Jerry kind of turned us on to the 80-20 and.
Yeah, the MKH stuff in general, their microphones, one thing that, is super incredibly important that Sennheiser just does better than anyone else is their microphones are RF biased, which, long story short, makes them able to handle very humid and very locations that would probably, bring a lot of microphones to their knees, and they would, start getting, maybe malfunctioning or getting high-end hiss or whatever. The Sennheisers, you can take them, in the middle of the Amazon and record, and they're still going to sound as great as they do, in a pristine studio environment. So, and they're reliable. I mean, it's just like, a professional photographer or whatever. You want to get the gear that's always going to do what you expect it to do, and they've just never let me down.
Yeah, and they sound really neutral, really, really good. They're not hyped too much. And that 80-20's got low end that just goes on and on and on. So it contrasts the shotgun and gives us another layer where we can blend those mics together. Like, just take all the high end off the 80-20, use it for the low end, and then use the shotgun for that discrete sound.
Fantastic. Right, I won't keep you too much longer. I've got one more question for you, and it's one I like to end off with. It's simply this. In your opinion, what is the most badass thing about the sound design in Guild Wars 2 Heart of Thorns?
That's a tough one.
It's everything together.
That's right. The cowards.
Yeah.
Cowards.
Yeah, I know.
Man, I guess for me personally, I just really think, being dropped into the environment and hearing just the day-night cycles of how things change the environment, it just feels like you're in this place that's very special and very exotic. And, I find myself just enjoying listening to the ambience on its own. That to me, that's the vibe of the game. I mean, I think that is probably it's a subtle thing. It's not like, an amazing explosion or something like that, but it conveys the whole feel of the game and really sets the stage, I think.
And skills, I think. I mean, yeah, you did a lot of work on skills, and there's a lot of differences between the professions, and I think they sound really good, and they're fun to play. I think that's important. Is there's a lot of can be a lot of clutter, and with the discreteness of them, with the interesting details they cut individually. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, well, thank you ever so much, guys, for taking the time to chat to me. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, Carl. Good talking with you.
And there you have it. Once again, thanks to Drew and Jerry for taking the time to chat to me about Heart of Thorns sound design. And if you want to learn more about Guild Wars 2, you can, of course, head over to the official website, which is at guildwars2.com. And that's it. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to stay up to date with the videos as we publish them. That's it now. See you next time. Bye-bye.